Laughter rippled through the grain elevator auction the moment the boy's hand went up. 13 years old, standing alone near the back, wearing boots 2 sizes too big for him, and he'd just bid on a tractor worth more than most trucks in that parking lot. Grown men turned in their seats to snicker. Someone muttered, "Somebody get this kid's mom." Yes, this really happened. He really did bid. And the grain elevator manager, watching from the podium, really did go pale for a reason nobody in that room saw coming. Comment below and tell me where you're watching this from. Nobody at that auction knew Caleb's name before that morning. He'd walked in alone, no father beside him, no uncle, nobody vouching for a 13-year-old standing among farmers 3 times his age. Most kids his age were home on a Saturday, not wedged between grown men bidding on machinery worth tens of thousands of dollars. But Caleb had a reason for being there, and it had nothing to do with attention. His father had passed away 8 months earlier, a tractor rollover accident on their own property. The kind of accident every farming family fears but never talks about until it happens to them. Since then, the family's 80-acre operation in rural Nebraska had been held together by his mother, his older sister, and whatever hours Caleb could put in before and after school. Their equipment was aging fast. Their main tractor, the one that had somehow survived the accident, was on its last stretch of usable life. Money had been tight for months, but Caleb had been saving. Every dollar from mowing neighbors' lawns, every check from selling off a few head of cattle his father had left behind, every birthday and Christmas gift he'd stashed away instead of spending it all went into a single envelope hidden in his dresser drawer. Counting it the night before, sitting cross-legged on his bedroom floor, he'd realized he finally had enough to make a real bid on the tractor listed for this weekend's auction. His mother hadn't known he planned to attend alone. She assumed he was at a friend's house that morning, not standing in a crowded auction barn with an envelope of cash folded inside his jacket pocket. He hadn't asked permission because he was certain she would have said no, not out of doubt in him, but out of fear of watching her son try to fill a hole nobody his age should have to fill. When the auctioneer called out the opening number on the tractor, Caleb's hand went up without hesitation. That was the moment the laughter started. But when the auctioneer, half joking, asked him to confirm his bid amount out loud, Caleb didn't flinch. He stated a number, his actual number, backed by real cash, and the room went quiet in a completely different way than it had a few seconds earlier. The auctioneer paused mid-sentence, glancing toward the side of the room where the grain elevator manager, a man everyone in the county simply called Mr. Halvorsen, stood reviewing paperwork near the entrance. Bids from minors weren't technically against the rules, but they weren't exactly common either, and the auctioneer clearly wanted someone with more authority to weigh in before letting a 13-year-old walk away with heavy machinery. Whispers spread through the crowd while everyone waited. A few farmers shook their heads, assuming this was some kind of prank or a dare gone too far. One man near the front loudly asked if the auction house was really about to entertain a bid from a kid who should be in school. Before we find out what happened next, hit subscribe, because the reason Mr. Halvorsen's face changed the moment he looked over is not what anyone in that room expected. Mr. Halvorsen set his clipboard down and walked slowly toward the front, his eyes fixed on Caleb the entire way. Something about the boy's face seemed to catch him off guard, though nobody else could tell why. He asked the auctioneer to repeat the bid amount, then asked Caleb directly where the money had come from. Caleb answered without hesitation: savings, cattle sales. Odd jobs around the county. Simple, honest, exactly what a hard-working kid trying to help his family would say. But it wasn't the money that made Mr. Halvorsen go quiet. It was the last name the auctioneer had read off Caleb's registration card at the start of the auction. Reaching into his jacket, Mr. Halvorsen pulled out his phone and scrolled to something before turning the screen toward the auctioneer, speaking too quietly for the crowd to hear. Whatever he saw on that screen made his hand visibly tighten around the phone. He looked back up at Caleb, and for the first time all morning, the confident, no-nonsense grain elevator manager everyone in the county respected looked genuinely shaken. The crowd, sensing something had shifted, went almost completely silent. Laughter from a few minutes earlier had disappeared entirely, replaced by confused glances and hushed questions passed between neighbors. Nobody understood what had just happened, but everyone could see that whatever Mr. Halvorsen had just recognized about this boy, it was about to change how the rest of this auction played out. Clearing his throat, Mr. Halvorsen asked everyone to give him just a moment before continuing the auction. He walked directly up to Caleb, crouched down slightly to meet him at eye level, and asked one question that silenced the last few whispers in the room. "Is your father Daniel Whitfield?" Caleb nodded, confused by the sudden shift in tone. Mr. Halvorsen exhaled slowly, then turned to face the crowd, his voice noticeably unsteady. He explained that 11 years earlier, during one of the worst droughts the county had ever seen, Caleb's father had personally organized a fund to help 3 struggling families in the area keep their farms from being auctioned off entirely, including, though almost nobody in the room knew it, Mr. Halvorsen's own family. Back then, Mr. Halvorsen had been a young man in his 20s, watching his parents' land slip toward foreclosure. Daniel Whitfield, a man he barely knew at the time, had quietly stepped in, organizing neighbors, contributing his own savings, and personally co-signing paperwork to buy his family the time they needed to recover. He'd never asked for recognition. He'd never told most people what he'd done. Mr. Halvorsen had only found out the full extent of it years later, from his own father, right before Daniel Whitfield passed away. Standing in front of that crowd, Mr. Halvorsen admitted he hadn't recognized Caleb by sight, but the moment he saw the Whitfield name on that registration card, everything clicked into place at once. This wasn't just some kid trying to buy a tractor with saved-up allowance money. This was the son of the man who had quietly kept his own family's farm from disappearing over a decade earlier, standing in the same auction house, trying to do the exact same thing for his own family now. His voice cracked slightly as he told the room that Caleb's bid would be honored in full, and that the auction house would be covering the remaining balance themselves, as a way of finally repaying a debt his own family had carried silently for 11 years. The room that had been laughing minutes earlier now sat in stunned, complete silence, several people visibly wiping their eyes. Caleb, still holding his envelope of carefully saved cash, didn't fully understand yet just how much his father's quiet kindness all those years ago was about to change his own family's future that same afternoon. Applause broke out slowly at first, then spread through the entire auction barn as people processed what they'd just witnessed. Farmers who had mocked Caleb minutes earlier now stood clapping, several walking over afterward to shake his hand or offer quiet apologies for their earlier comments. The same boy who'd been laughed at for raising his hand was now the reason an entire room had gone silent with emotion. Mr. Halvorsen kept his word. The auction house covered the remaining balance on the tractor, and within an hour, Caleb was arranging for it to be delivered to his family's property later that week. He called his mother from the parking lot, still shaking, trying to explain everything that had just happened in a single confusing rush of words. She drove straight to the auction house, and by the time she arrived, half a dozen local farmers were already offering to help haul the tractor home themselves. Word of what happened spread through the county within days, then further once a local paper picked up the story. People wanted to know more about Daniel Whitfield, the quiet act of kindness that had apparently gone unspoken for over a decade, and the son who had unknowingly carried his father's legacy into that same auction house without even realizing it. For Caleb's family, the tractor meant more than replaced equipment. It meant one less thing to worry about during a year that had already taken so much from them. His mother later said the moment reminded her of exactly the kind of man her husband had been, someone who helped people quietly, expecting nothing in return, and never once mentioned it at the dinner table. Mr. Halvorsen, for his part, said the moment reminded him why small communities matter the way they do. A debt he never expected to repay had come full circle in the most unexpected way possible, inside the same auction house where his own family's future had once hung in the balance. Caleb still works that 80-acre farm today, older now, driving the very tractor that started as mockery and ended as tribute. What looked, for a few brief minutes, like a kid embarrassing himself in front of a room full of adults, turned out to be something far bigger, a quiet story about kindness passed forward, arriving exactly when a family needed it most. A boy mocked for his bid turned out to be honoring a debt he never even knew existed. Caleb's father's quiet kindness came back 11 years later, exactly when his family needed it most. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real moments where kindness quietly comes full circle.